Good morning, students. Myself, Bhavya Kini from Gumpa Municipal Secondary English School. I welcome you all for statewide live online lecture. Yesterday, students, we started with the revision of chapter number 8. Okay, we completed part of the lesson, tourism and history. Okay, we covered the points related to how was the tourism in the past. It's from the past the trend of tourism has been carried out. We also looked on to the travelers like Benjamin, Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, Gerardus Mercator. We also did a concept of tourism and how it dates back to the the name of Thomas Cook, who is noteworthy in context with tourism history. Then we also did about the traditional traveling from different corners or corner to corner was prevalent from ancient time. In that regards, we discussed about Vishnubhat Godse, who wrote accounts of his journey from Maharashtra to Ayodhya and back to Maharashtra. Okay, and which was published in his book, published in his book Maza Pravas. We also did about different types of tourism, students. Okay, wherein it was in detail for local and interstate tourism. Okay, which is within India or within our state Maharashtra. Then international tourism, which is traveling to different countries of the world for various purposes. Then we also did about historical tourism, then religious tourism, the geographic tourism, which is basically related to the geographic features of the region. People travel, it involves visiting places to just to observe the natural beauty or geographic features. Then we did about health tourism as a type of tourism where people from Western countries or different parts of the world travel to India because of comparatively cheaper and yet good standard of health services in our country. And another reason we have a tropical climate in our country. Then we did agro-tourism, then sports tourism, which developed in 20th century, and the why people visit to which are the different sports event, international sports events, which are organized and people tend to visit this where the to the places where these events are arranged. That is also one kind of tourism. Then we did tourism based on special events, which is basically people travel to attend film festivals or various types of seminars, conference, or international book exhibitions. Now today we will complete the rest part of the chapter. We will do the revision of the rest part of the chapter that is left. Okay. Now let's continue, students. So it's development of tourism. Okay. Now, what are the things which is important for development of tourism? Okay. Now, this industry of tourism, okay, this is a growing industry. It will go on continuously. Okay, and it's a stable industry. So the crucial issue, you can say very important issue in the development of tourism is to provide proper guidance to the national and international tourists. Means the tourists who visit within the nation or from international countries, they should be given a proper kind of guidance. Okay, the, about various aspects of actual travel. Okay, which are the sites they are going to visit. Okay, and what are the facilities they are going to be provided to them, like proper guidance should be given to them, and their proper social conduct, you can say, the manners, the basic etiquettes, the attitude they need to follow during the tour and during their stay at the destination places. Okay, so these are the important issue which come in the development, which comes under development of tourism. Then giving priority to ensure safe transport and security facilities for the tourist, amenities of reasonably good standard, okay, is a must. Now you can say there should be lot of importance well given to ensure safe transport. Okay, whenever the people are go on tour, okay, that wherever they are traveling, okay, the transport which the provision which is given, it should be safe for them. That is must. And there should be security for facilities, like there should not be any kind of theft or cheating with them, okay, of the tourists. And amenities of reasonably good standard, okay, the facilities should be of good quality, good standard for them. Availability of good accommodation wherever, motels, hotels, resorts, wherever they are staying, it should be of good quality. The provision should be good, the facilities should be good. Good washroom facilities, okay, that is must. The basic hygiene or cleanliness on the travel routes is of great significance in promoting tourism. So these are the important things which promotes tourism. Because if the tourists, when they have their, when they travel, they have a good experience. Yeah, there's a lot of, the transport is good, the facility is good, the amenities is good. So they will recommend other tourists as well. Okay. So what happens because of this? It promotes tourism. Now, it is also very important to pay special attention to the special needs of handicapped tourists. Okay, so you need to when there is a tour arranged, so very special attention needs to be given to the needs of the people who are disabled or who are handicapped. Okay, their needs are different, so accordingly they should be catered. Now, it is important to take a few primary precautions in order to preserve the historical heritage sites. Okay. Now, historical heritage sites. Whenever we visit some heritage historical heritage sites, okay, maybe Taj Mahal in Agra, or Humayun Tomb in Delhi. Okay. So there is very important. There are very few basic precautions that needs to be done to preserve this historical site heritage sites. It is essential that few things should be avoided. Okay, at instance, for example, you can say vandalizing means destroying. Okay, destroying or defacing means spoil. When you spoil the way something, okay, you spoil something by writing or making making some marks on its surface. So whenever you visit, you should you should bring into notice that you don't do all these things like scrapping on the walls, writing something on the monument, on the surface of the monuments. Okay, so these things should be avoided. In order to avoid it, everybody should refrain means stop from activities like writing on walls, or as you can see in the picture also, students, or carving on trees, paint ancient monuments in garish colors, means very bright colors, etc. So you need to avoid all these things. Stop for doing all these activities when you visit any of the tourist places. Lack of good amenities in the precincts. Precincts means area, boundary, or the premises wherever of the tourist center, of the heritage sites, causes filthiness. Okay, so if there is no good facilities, okay, around the premises, okay, it is what happens because of that, near the in the heritage site, it causes dirtiness, filthiness. So it is another thing is, it is very essential for the tourist that pamphlets is basically a very thin book, okay, with a paper cover containing information about a particular subject. Okay, whenever people visit, okay, you might have also you get a kind of pamphlet of that particular place or the site you are visiting. So it is very essential for tourists that pamphlets, guides, okay, there are guides also, and history books about about a tourist site be available in their own language. Okay, so this, when it comes to visiting, okay, the people, it's not that as we saw different types of tourism all over the world, people travel. So it's not necessary if there's some people are traveling to our country, they know our language, local language. So the pamphlets which have been printed, or it should be in number variety of language, so that people can read it and understand it. Okay, so hence such literature should be made available in various languages. It would be helpful if the taxi drivers, okay, are trained to converse in more than one language. Okay, the taxi drivers, the local taxi drivers of that particular area, or that particular place, they should be trained to speak in more than one language. Because when people travel, they can take guide, the taxi driver can guide the tourist. Okay, about the place which they can visit, what are the facility, what are the food availability, if there is no language barrier, okay, and if they know more than one language, the taxi driver know more than one language. They may also be trained as a tourist guide. Okay, so these taxi drivers, they can also be guide, trained as a tourist guide, means as a tour guide. Tourist guide or tour guide is basically a person. Okay, as you can see in this corner picture, they provide assistance, information, cultural, historical, and contemporary heritage to people on organized sightseeing and individual clients at educational establishment, religious and historical sites such as museums, and at various venues of tourists. So this was the part that we covered, that is regarding the development of tourism. What are the things? What are the important things that should be undertaken or taken care of? Okay, when it comes to development of tourism. The next is conservation and preservation of heritage. Okay, so it is a hard task to preserve and conserve heritage sites. Okay. Now, student, what is heritage? Heritage is like valued objects, qualities, or you can say such as a historic building and cultural tradition that have been passed from one generation to another generation, next generation. Okay, so we have heritage sites. Okay, we are very rich, our country is rich in heritage sites. Okay, heritage sites, and it's an official location where piece of political, military, cultural or social history have been preserved due to their cultural heritage value. So it is very difficult to preserve and conserve, okay, this heritage sites, and our country is very rich with historical sites dating to ancient, medieval, and modern period. As our period of history, okay, dating back to ancient, medieval, and modern period, we have have a very we are very blessed, you can say, with historical sites, different historical monuments, different historical places or of historical importance in our country. So it is also blessed with abundance of nature. We are also blessed with a lot of natural beauty in our country. Heritage of any country is divided into natural heritage and cultural, man-made heritage. You have studied about this in your chapter Applied History as well, about natural heritage and cultural heritage, where we have tangible and intangible heritage, cultural heritage. So it is divided into two. So there are some heritage sites in our country, India, which are acclaimed, you can say, which are famous, okay, all over the world. Like this, such as Taj Mahal at Agra. You can see the pictures also, students here. Then Jantar Mantar Observatory at Jaipur, okay, and also rock cut caves at Ajanta, Verul and Dharapuri Elephanta, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Railway Terminus in Maharashtra. Okay, these are selected by an international organization, as we have started in Applied History chapter as well, by UNESCO. It's an international organization agency of United Nations. This have been selected by UNESCO as a World Cultural Heritage for its cultural, historical, and scientific history. Okay, so we should be very proud about it. Like this heritage site from our country has been acclaimed by UNESCO itself. Kars Plateau in Maharashtra is located in Western Ghats, which is a World Natural Heritage Site. It is also included in UNESCO's World Natural Heritage Site. So there are tourists all over the world who wish to visit World Heritage Site. Okay, so it is not only in particular part of the world the people travel, but it's all over the world the people wish to travel this World Heritage Sites and know more about it. Foreign tourists come in large numbers to visit the heritage sites in our country. So many people from foreigners come and they visit these heritage sites in our country. It makes us feel very proud when an Indian heritage site is declared as the World Heritage Site. Okay. So anything about our country, India, or anything about Indian, okay, we hear all over the world, or it's acclaimed or famous all over the. So we also feel proud as an Indian. Okay. So, however, whenever we visit such places, we feel very disappointed. We are very sad. Why? Because of what we see there. Okay, we get to see that people have written their names on the charcoal. They written their names with charcoal, have drawn pictures, vandalizing the heritage sites. So many a times when we visit, we can see people writing, scrapping, as I told, with charcoal on the walls, drawing pictures, destroying the heritage sites. It affects our image as a nation. So whenever some people from outside our country, okay, outside from different parts of the world, they see people doing this. So what kind of image they will have about us? So we should not do that, students. To preserve the heritage sites, we need to resolve that. Okay. So for the preservation, to save, to conserve our heritage site for future, we need to decide. We need to resolve. Okay, that I shall strive. I shall try very hard. Okay, to maintain the cleanliness of the heritage sites. Okay, if I see other people also doing, I will suggest them, request them, please don't do it. It will destroy, it will get spoiled. Okay, so we should do that. I shall not do anything which will result in vandalizing of any historical site. Okay, so these are the things which comes under conservation and preservation of heritage. Then we come to heritage walks. Okay, to go on a tour for visiting historical places is known as heritage walk. Now, what is heritage tour? Is basically visiting historical places and to go on a tour on it, tour to these places. One can experience the thrill. Thrill means the excitement of being a part of history by participating in the heritage walk. Heritage walks as an organized group activity has gained popularity in many countries. Okay, so this heritage walks is popular in many countries. And coming to our country, India has a rich history which can be traced back to many millenniums. Okay, as I told you, our we have a very good source of history, and it goes back to period of thousands of years. Every region of India is full of historical places from ancient, medieval, and modern periods. The Heritage Walk, organized in the city of Ahmedabad, is well known. Okay? So there is this Heritage Walk which is organized in the city of Ahmedabad. Okay, it is very famous. In the cities of Mumbai and Pune in Maharashtra, such walks are organized regularly. Heritage walks can encourage people to support projects like conservation and preservation of historical monuments. Okay, so this heritage walk, when it is organized and when people take part in it, they support projects like how to conserve and preserve our historical monuments, to collect authentic means which is relevant or trustworthy information about them, and to publish it in various media like newspapers, internet, television. Okay, residents of renowned citizens. Residence means the place where the renowned citizens of our country, the famous citizens of our country who have passed away, are also a part of heritage. Okay. How it is so? In some cities, blue plaques, you can just see this right hand side corner picture here, students. So that is called a blue plaque. Okay, it's like a round blue sign attached to the facade of a building to commemorate its historical significance, typically giving the name of a famous person who once lived in that building. Okay, you can see here the blue plaque of Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. Okay, and the year he is born and the year of his death. Okay, and it is outside his residence. So, in some cities, blue plaques with the names and other relevant information of such citizens are placed on their residence as a part of heritage scheme. Okay, so this was about heritage walk. What is heritage walk? In which places it is famous? Okay, and about the and as a part of heritage, the blue plates, which is outside the residence of the famous citizens who have passed away now of our country. Then next we have professional opportunities. okay, in tourism and hospitality industry. Now, what are the employment or what profession, okay, one can undertake in tourism and hospitality industry? Hospitality, like in any hotels or resorts, motels, restaurants. What are the opportunity one can get? Now, tourism and hospitality is an industry with potential to create maximum employment opportunities. Okay, so in this industry, tourism and hospitality industry, people get a lot of jobs. Okay, there's a lot of opportunities. Okay, so in tourism industry, you can say tourism and hospitality industry, one can be a travel consultant, one can be travel agent, one can be a hotel management, a tour operator, one can be event and conference organizer, one can be a chef in a hotel, PR manager, or IATA trainer. So there's a lot of job opportunities. If managed professionally, it is a very stable. It's stable means firmly fixed industry which can be taken to a long run. It has a tremendous scope for experimentation and innovation. A lot of experiments and innovative creativity can be done in this industry. A good number of opportunities of employment are available in tourism and hospitality industry. As I told you, a lot of employment opportunities are available for different designations. The country which is a tourist destination begins to receive revenue even before a tourist arrives at the airport of that country. Mhm. So the country which is a tourist destination where many the people keep on visiting that place, okay, they receive the revenue, the amount before the tourist arrives at the airport of that country, because the tourist who is traveling, they have to arrange and pay for their visa. Okay, so that part of money is already as a revenue comes to the destination place they are going to visit. And when the tourist visits that particular tourist center or the location, what he does, he spends for his travel. Okay, the places he is going to, the site he is going to visit, he spends for the travel. He pays for the stay in hotels, food, payment to translators, the one who translates the in the local language, and guides, buying newspapers, reference books of that particular place. There also the tourist place. Souvenirs means if there's some people buy the famous ornaments that has been sold there, or there's some tattoos or some postcard T-shirts they buy, etc. So when the tourist travels, they pay for all these things. What happens because of this? This contributes to the growth of economy of that country. Okay, to the trade, or you can say production and consumption of goods and services of that particular country. Now, markets in the vicinity means the surrounding area or the premises grow along with the development of a tourist center. Because whenever if there is a, besides center, there are markets, and people, once they visit the tourist center, they go to the nearby market. They will buy some things which that particular place is famous for. It can be a handicraft, okay, it can be a food item, okay, it can be some kind of pottery, or some kind of some kind of wall hanging, okay, some kind of saris, or if the place is famous for. So people go to the market and they buy things. So hence the local handicraft, okay, the local handicrafts like painting, jewelry, pottery, and cottage industries like cotton weaving, silk weaving, carpet making, leather industry, metal handicraft, so they also begin to develop. Okay, why people visit this market, they buy things, they also this the people who are selling there, they also earn money. So the demand for locally processed food items, okay, the local the locally food items, if the what it is famous for, the demand increases. And ethnic handicrafts like wall hanging, candle holders, kitchen and dining, flower vase, okay, follow increases. It results in better income for local artisans, The artisans who make things with hand, all these things like a pot or a flower vase. So they also get better income. Business people and wage earners, the laborers working there. Okay. So indirectly, when there is tourism or the tourist travel, so indirectly all these things are affected. All these things, it contributes to all these things, and it provides income to these peoples as well, and provides and ultimately leads to the development as well as contributes to the growth of economy of that country. Then we have development of tourism in Maharashtra. In our state, Maharashtra, uh, we will do that how the development of tourism takes place. Now, Maharashtra is a state blessed with rich heritage. Not only our country, our state of Maharashtra is also blessed with very rich heritage. The much admired rock cut caves, paintings, and sculptures of Ajanta, Berul, and Gharpuri Elephanta, pilgrim centers like Dehu, Alandi, okay, pilgrim centers like religious place or you can say holy place like Dehu, Alandi, you can see in the picture. Jejuri, it's all located in Maharashtra students. Pandarpur, many of us has visited also. Shirdi, Shegaon, Tulzapur, Kolhapur, Nasik, Trimbakeshwar, Paitan, Hajimalang, you can see in the picture. Gurudwara at Nanded, that also is there in the picture. Mount Mary Church in Mumbai, Bandra, etc. Okay, so all these places are the much liked and people visit there. Hill stations like Mahabaleshwar, Panchgani, Khandala, Lonavala, Matheran, Chikaldara, etc. Dams at Koina Nagar, Jayakwadi, Bhatgar, Chandoli, etc. Sanctuaries at Dajipur, Sagareshwar, Tadoba, okay, etc., are among the important tourist centers in Maharashtra. So all these, the one which I've mentioned now, they all are the important tourist center, and people do visit, much like to visit these tourist centers in our state, Maharashtra. Then we have the Maharashtra Tourism Development Corporation, okay, MTDC short form, was set up in 1975. It helped in the development of tourism in Maharashtra. So this corporation, MTDC, it helps to the development of tourism in our state, Maharashtra. The corporation has provided facilities of tourist hotels at 47 places. Okay, so what they do, they provide tourist hotels at 47 places. Together, these hotels can accommodate, so they have a capacity of accommodating more than 4,000 tourists. Many private entrepreneurs, businessmen are also providing hospitality services to tourists. Okay, so many private businessmen also they provide hospitality services like hotels or lodge or motels to the tourists who visit these places. The next we have is an unusual village of books. Okay, Billar is a village near Mahabaleshwar. Okay, there is a village, students, near Mahabaleshwar. The name of the village is Billar. Okay, which boasts of natural beauty. It is full of natural beauty, and there is sweetness of strawberry. There you will get. It is also known as the village of books. So this village, Billar, it is known as village of books. Okay. Now, why is this known as village of books? We will look onto it. Every household in this village maintains a library of its own for the tourists to enjoy. So every household in this village, what they do, they have a library, small library of their own. And when the tourists visit these villages, they visit this household. They enjoy reading books in this library. Now, Maharashtra state government has implemented this scheme with a view to accelerate, means to speed up the reading culture movement for the reader tourist. Okay, many people like to read, so for them it is a very good opportunity to visit and read to enjoy the beauty of Marathi literature, the written works, the poem, the novels, the fables, short stories, historical facts, okay, enriched by the works of old, made better by the work of old and new authors and saints. It includes various types of text like biographies of famous personalities, autobiographies, fictions, imaginary stories, poetry, literature by women, literature on different sports, literature for kids, etc. So, if we visit Mahabaleshwar, we can visit this village and have opportunity or enjoy reading books of different at different households. If you go to Mahabaleshwar, make it a point to visit Bilar as well. How they maintain a library, you can see here in the picture as well. Then we have cultural tourism. Okay, this includes activities like visiting educational institutes of repute. If it means famous educational institute, when you visit, it's under cultural tourism. Trying to get a glimpse, you can say, quick view of local culture, history, and traditions. Visiting historical monuments at a place. When you visit particular place, you understand their history, the importance of the history of the past, that their tradition, what culture they follow. That comes under all cultural tourism. Trying to appreciate the achievements of the local people, and when you also participate in the local festivals, dance, music, etc. So cultural tourism basically related to the culture and the traditions, okay, the beliefs, the the language, the to appreciate the history of that particular place, the tradition they follow, the festivals, the customs they follow, the music, the dance, okay. So it all comes under cultural tourism. Then we have Mahabaleshwar and Panchagani as and our hill stations. Thousands of tourists arrive here. So this there are hill stations in our state Maharashtra. These are famous ones, Mahabaleshwar and Panchagani. Thousands of tourists they arrive here. These tourists are accompanied by guides who provide relevant information on the sightseeing tour. Okay, so these the tourists which who visit this hill station, they are accompanied by guides who give them information about that place and sightseeing tour. At some places, photographers are present to click nice snaps for the tourist. At some when you might have also visited, you might have seen there are photographers who insist to click pictures or photos. Housekeepers provide horses. Horsekeepers provide horses for horse rides and horse cart rides. It is the local people who are engaged to these activities. So the local people there only are involved in these activities, and they earn good money for their service which they provide. In short, tourism has become a major source of their livelihood. Okay, so because of tourism, because of the tourists traveling there, they earn money, and if they earn money, and there it becomes a major source of their earning or livelihood. So we have completed this part, the revision of this part, and we have completed with the revision of this chapter as well, students. I hope the chapter now uh, you have understood the chapter well. Okay. Now I will go through few points you need to remember in this chapter. Okay. Now we have here Chinese monk traveled to India. Okay, it was in 630 CE, and who was he? It was Yuan Shang. Now then we have saints from medieval period who used to travel. This was Sant Namdev, Sant Eknath, Guru Nanak, Ramdas Swami. Then traveling to visit places in distant region for specific purpose. The term for it is tourism. First European traveler discoverer, that is Benjamin Tudela. Italian traveler of 13th century, Marco Polo. 14th century traveler who took the world on a virtual travel of Islamic world with his travel account, that is Ibn Battuta. 16th century cartographer known for creating a world map and globe of the earth, that is Gerardus Mercator. 19th century explorer who organized a trip around Europe and established a travel agency selling tourist tickets, that is Thomas Cook. Vishnubat Godse wrote an account of his journey between Maharashtra and Ayodhya during the Indian War of Independence 1857. He wrote in his book Maza Pravas. Desire to visit places which promotes tourism, that is national or international monuments, places of historical importance and natural beauty, centers of handicrafts, pilgrimage, industries, and development projects. Now, what are the different types of tourism? Local, interstate, international, religious, historical, health tourism, science tourism, sports tourism, special events, tourism on special events, etc. Local and interstate tourism, there's no difficulty of language. Procurement means obtaining of currency and documents. There's no difficulty in that as well. International tourism, availability of railway, that is Trans-European Railway route, marine linking coastal region, and air transport. Then we have Marathi writer who arranged hiking tours to forts in Maharashtra, that is Gopal Neelkantha Dandekar. Example of geographic tourism in Maharashtra, the Krecher Lake at Lonar and Ranjan Kharge at Nikhoj. Reason for health tourism in India, as I have explained you all, it's cheap yet of good health services, tropical climate which we have, and availability of facilities for yoga training and Ayurvedic therapies. Agro-tourism benefits the Indian farmers, like they visit agricultural research center, agricultural universities, and countries where experimentation in agricultural technology is carried out in Israel. Then sport tourism, the international events like Olympics, Wimbledon, World Chess Championship matches, and international cricket tournaments. National, we have in Himalayan car rally. The state event, we have Maharashtra Kesari wrestling competition. Then we have examples of tourism based on special events like film festivals, seminars, and conferences, international book exhibition. Now, when was the Maharashtra Tourism Development Corporation set up? In the year 1975. Rock cut caves are Ajanta, Verul, and Gharapuri. Pilgrim centers in Maharashtra, Dehu, Alandi, Jejuri, Pandharpur, Shirdi, Shegaon, Tulzapur, Kolhapur, Nasik, Trimbakeshwar, Paitan, Hajimalang, etc. Hill stations in Maharashtra, Mahabaleshwar, Panchgani, Khandala, Lonavala, Mathiran, Chikaldara, etc. Dams, Koinanagar, Jayakwadi, Bhatgarh, Chandoli, etc. Sanctuary, Dajipur, Sagareshwar, Tadoba, etc. Then literary gathering that is conducted in Maharashtra as a part of Hello, ma'am. Hello. Ma'am, can you hear me? Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, miss.
Okay. I got disconnected, I think. I'll connect again. Ma'am, can I share? Vasha, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Wind up the lecture.
Yes, ma'am. Just I got disconnected in between. Just a minute due to network problem. Ma'am, I am unable to share.
Okay, ma'am. Finish your lecture.
Okay. Okay, students, we have covered the part. We have done the important points to remember, and we have completed with the review. Good morning, children. Welcome to today's class of Science and Technology, Part 1. I am Vimla Verma from Vilepale East MPS Secondary, and today we are going to continue the chapter number 8, Metallurgy, Module 4. So we have seen the objective of this chapter, and from this we have already finished physical properties of metals, physical properties of non-metals, chemical properties of metals, chemical properties of non-metals, reactivity series of metals, ionic compounds, and yesterday we began the various concepts of metallurgy. In this module, we are going to learn about the basic principles of metallurgy, and the basic principles of metallurgy, they are basically classified into three stages. The first one is concentration of ore. In concentration of ore, depending upon the type of ore, we follow different methods to concentrate the ore. The first one is gravity based separation, magnetic separation, growth flotation, then fourth one is leaching. After the concentration of ore, we move on to the second step of metallurgy, that is the extraction of metals. In extraction of metals, there are three types of metals depending upon their reactivity series, that is highly reactive metals, moderately reactive metals, and low reactivity metals. So in today's module, we will study basically on extraction of highly reactive metals, and in this we will mainly focus on the extraction of aluminium. Okay, so let's begin today's module with revision what we studied yesterday. We studied that basic principles of metallurgy. It includes three main stages. The first one, that is concentration of ore. In concentration of ore, we basically remove the unwanted, or you can say the gang in the present in the ore. What are the gang? Gang are the rock, soil, or mud present in the ore. In the second stage, that is the extraction of metals, we get the concentrated ore, and the concentrated ore is then converted to other forms like oxides and sulfides so that it can be easily extracted from them.
And the next one is refining of metals. In refining of metals, we do the electrolysis of the ore, because which we get from the extraction of metal. These metals, they are not exactly pure. They contain some impurities. So with the help of electrolysis, we obtain pure metals from the impure ones. Now let's see the concentration of ore. In the concentration of ore, we remove the gangue from the ore. In this process, the concentration of compound of the desired metal is increased. Okay. So there are various methods for concentration of ore. It depends upon the physical properties of metals present in the ore and the gangue. And it also depends upon the reactivity of metals and facilities available for purification. And during doing the concentration of ore, we also consider that these processes, they should not harm the environment. They should not cause air pollution also. Okay. Now let's see the some methods of concentration of ore. We can see here the first method is separation based on gravitation. Second one is magnetic separation method. Third is growth flotation. And fourth is leaching. So separation based on gravitation, it is of two types, Wilfley table method, and the second one is hydraulic separation method. So let's see the first one, the separation based on gravitation. The basic principle of this method is that the ores present in them, they are denser. Okay. So the ores which have high density and the gangue present in them, they have lighter weight. Okay. So for them, this method is applicable. Okay. So let's see what is the Wilfley table method. The first method, as you can see here in the picture, the Wilfley table method, it is a table in which it is made by fixing narrow and thin wooden raffles on inclined surface. The table is kept vibrating continuously. Powdered ore obtained from the ball mill is poured on the table. A stream of water is also released from the upper side. As a result, as the gangue particles, they are lighter in weight, they are carried away, or you can say they are washed away along with the water. Okay. And as you can see, the washed away gangue particles, they are collected below separately. Okay. And the heavier particles, they are blocked by the wooden ripples and get collected on the slits between them. You can see here in this picture, these slits are present over here. In these slits, as the ore particles, they are heavy, they get collected over here and they can separately collected. Okay, this is a picture of real Wilfley table method. You can see there are some ripples which are present over here, in which the concentrated ores, they are collected. Okay, now let's move on to the second method, that is hydraulic separation method. Hydraulic separation method is based on working of a mill. As you can see, there is a tapping vessel similar to that used in a grinding mill. It opens in a tank like container that is tapping at the lower side. The tank has an outlet for water on the upper side and there is a inlet of water on the lower side. Let's see how it works. Finely powdered ore is released in the tank and a forceful jet of water is introduced in the tank from the lower side. The gangue particles, as they are lighter, therefore they flow out along with the water jet from the outlet on the upper side of the tank and get collected separately. Whereas heavy particles of the ore, because they are heavy, they are collected at the bottom from the lower side of the tank. This method is based on the law of gravitation, wherein particles of the same size are separated by their weight with the help of water. So these are the two methods, Wilfley table method and hydraulic separation method, in which we separate those ores which are heavy in weight, whereas their gangue particles, they are lighter in weight. Now let's move on to the next method, that is magnetic separation method. So this method is applicable for the ores which are magnetic in nature and their gangue particles are not magnetic in nature. So as you can see the construction of this method, here there are two types of iron rollers And here you can see the first roller, it is made up of non-magnetic roller, and the second one is made up of magnet. Okay, or you can say it is made up of a magnetic material. And one of the rollers is non-magnetic while the others is electromagnetic. The conveyor belt moving around the rollers is non-magnetic. This conveyor belt is non-magnetic in nature. It is either made up of leather or brass. The powdered ore, it is poured on the conveyor belt near the non-magnetic roller. This is a non-magnetic roller. Nearby this, the ore is poured. Okay. The powdered ore, after that, it moves on the conveyor belt and it passes through the magnetic roller. As we know that the magnetic ore, it will be attracted towards the magnetic roller and it will remain stick towards it, and it will get separated in one container. Whereas the gangue particles, as they are not magnetic in nature, they will not get attracted towards the magnetic roller, so it will fall separately in other container. Okay, so let's see, this is a real image of a magnetic separation method mechanism. You can see here. So how the magnetic materials, the minerals, they are, or you can say the materials, they are collected in one container, and non-magnetic materials, they are separated in a other container. Okay. Now let's see what kind of ores they can be separated by using this magnetic separation method. The first one is cassiterite. It is a tin ore containing the non-magnetic ingredient. Then stannic oxide and the magnetic ingredient ferrous tungstate. These are separated by electromagnetic method. Now let's see the next one, that is called force flotation method. This is also the method of concentration of force. The force flotation method is based on two opposite properties, that is hydrophilic and hydrophobic of the particles. So here hydrophilic, hydro means water, philic means loving. So here some of the particles in the ore, they are hydrophilic in nature. That means they are water loving. And the other one is hydrophobic. Phobic means fear. So some of the particles, they have a fear of water. That means they move away from the water. So based on these two properties, this process it works. So basically here ore is hydrophobic. That means it moves away from the water. Whereas the gangue particles, they are hydrophilic in nature. They get attracted towards the water. They dissolve in water. Okay. So on this principle, force flotation method, it works. The particles of the metal sulfide, due to their hydrophobic property, get wetted mainly with the oil. As we have seen that the ore is hydrophobic in nature. It doesn't dissolve in water. Where it dissolves, it mixes up with the oil. While due to hydrophilic property, the gangue particles get wetted with the water. As we have seen that gangue is hydrophilic in nature, so it dissolves with water. By using these properties, certain ores are concentrated by force flotation method. Okay, so on which principle this process it works? Here we can see that the ore, it is preferentially wetted by the oil and hence floats on the top as a foam. So ore is hydrophobic in nature, it moves away from the water, but it gets wetted by the oil. Okay, and the gangue particles, as they are hydrophilic in nature, they are wetted by the water and they settle down. Now let's see the whole process. You can see the setup here. This is a big container. Okay, so in this big container, finely grounded ore in the powdered form put into a big tank containing ample amount of water. It is ample amount of water means sufficient amount of water is present and in which the ore is put. Okay. Now, certain vegetable oils such as pine oil or eucalyptus oil is added in water for the formation of food. Now, what we have done, we added some vegetable oil. It can be a pine oil or eucalyptus oil. It is added in the water, and there is a agitator here. Okay, and pressurized air is blown through the water. Here you can see agitator, and a pressurized air is blown through this agitator. There is an agitator rotating around the axis in the center of flotation tank. The agitator used as per need. Okay, so after moving continuously, you can see the air supply is passed through it, and because of this agitation, bubbles are formed here. You can see large amount of bubbles are formed here in this process. Okay, so what happens due to agitation, a foam is formed from the oil, water and air bubbles together due to the agitation. So you can see continuously it is agitating, it is moving, and because of which foam, you can say the leather is formed upside because of oil, water and air bubbles together. This foam rises to the surface of water and it floats. That is why this method is called froth flotation process, because froth is formed in this process. Particles of sulfide ore, as we studied that particles of sulfide ore, they mix with the oil present in it, and along with the foam, it floats on the top of the water. Okay. For example, this method is used for the concentration of zinc blende and copper pyrite. These are the sulfide ores, zinc blende ZNS and copper pyrite CuFeS2. Okay. So such kind of ore, what they do, they get wetted by the oil, and due to agitation they form floats, and these ores they come along with the float on the top surface of the water, and from there they get collected into a separate container. But the gangue particles, as they are hydrophilic in nature, they dissolve in water and they get settled down at the base. Okay, as you can see here at the base, and they get separated collectively. And here you can see here the fruit is collected in a separate container, and from this we can collect the concentrated ore. Okay, now let's see the next process. Next process is leaching. Leaching is a process where ore is treated with chemicals to convert valuable metals into soluble salts while impurity remains insoluble. This is the first step in the extraction of metals like aluminium, gold, and silver. The ore is soaked in a certain solution for a long time. The ore dissolves in that solution due to a specific chemical reaction. The gangue, however, it does not react and therefore does not dissolve in that solution, so it can be separated easily. For example, concentration of the aluminium ore bauxite is done by leaching method. Here, bauxite is soaked in aqueous NaOH or aqueous Na2CO3, which dissolves the main ingredient alumina in it. Okay, so these were the four processes for the concentration of ore. The first one was separation based on gravitation. Second, magnetic separation method. Third, froth flotation method. And the fourth one is leaching. After that, we are going to move on to the second step, that is the extraction of metal. After the concentration of the ore, we do the extraction of metal from the concentrated ore. So during the extraction of metals from their ores, metal is obtained from the cation of metal. In this process, the metal cation is to be reduced. As we know that metals, they normally form positive ions, that is called cations, right? So here we have to reduce these metal cations. Depending upon the reactivity of metal, reducing process is determined, and the extraction of metal depends on its reactivity. Okay, so here we are going to learn three types of extractions. First one is for the extraction of reacting metals. Then second one for the extraction of moderately reactive metals. Then third one, it is for the extraction of less reactive metals. Okay, so we are going to begin with the extraction of reactive metals. So as you can see here, the reactivity series is shown, right? You can see here the topmost elements, they are highly reactive, in between they are moderately reactive, and the lower one, they are least reactive. So depending upon the reactivity of these metals, we use different methods to reduce them. Okay, so you can learn this series by the help of these codes. You can see P for potassium, S for sodium, Ca for calcium, M for magnesium, A for aluminium, okay, and so on. So you can learn here. Please stop calling me a careless zebra. Instead, try learning how copper saves gold. So you can learn this, and along with that, you will be able to learn the reactivity series very easily. Okay. So the metals at the top of the reactivity series, they are highly reactive. For example, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, aluminium. So all of them, they came as a highly reactive element. So the reactivity decreases down the series. Reactive metals have large capacity to form cations by losing the electron in their outermost shell. For example, reactive metals, they react vigorously with dilute acids to give hydrogen gas. Also, they burn by reacting with oxygen from air at room temperature. Their extraction has to be done by electrolytic reduction. So the highly reactive metals, they are obtained in pure form by the process of electrolytic reduction. So you have to keep it in your mind that all these reactive metals, they are extracted by electrolytic reduction method. We do their reduction by electrolytic reduction method. For example, the metals sodium, calcium, and magnesium, they are obtained by electrolysis of their molten chloride salt. Okay. In this process, the metal is deposited on the cathode while chlorine gas is liberated at the anode. The electrode reactions during the electrolysis of molten sodium chloride to get metallic sodium are. You can see the cathode and anode reaction. Okay. As we know that cathode, it is a what charge is present on cathode? The negative charge electrode is called as the cathode, and positively charged electrode is called as the anode. So we know that opposite charges, they attract each other. That's why the sodium ion formed in the solution, it gets attracted towards the negative electrode, that is called as cathode, and there it accepts an electron and forms sodium atom. Okay. So we know that reduction is a process in which an electron is accepted, right? So as sodium is accepting electron here, so this process is called reduction. Okay, so in this process we are getting sodium metal, that is pure sodium metal. Okay, in the same way, the chloride ion, as it is negatively charged, it gets attracted towards the positive electrode, that is anode, and here you can see it again here loses two electrons, because here we have taken two chloride ions. One chloride ion loses one electron. So two chloride ions, they will lose two electrons. Okay, and because of which we are getting here two electrons, and the chloride ion gets converted into chlorine molecule here, Cl2. And as it is losing electrons, so this process is called as oxidation process. Okay. Now we are going to start the extraction of aluminium. So before we sorry, extraction of aluminium, you can see the symbol of aluminium, Al, atomic number 13. If atomic number is 13, that means it will have 13 electrons, 13 protons. Okay. Atomic mass 27. What is atomic mass? Atomic mass, it is the sum of number of protons plus number of neutrons. The electronic configuration, it is 2, 8, 3. So number of electrons in the outermost shell, that is the valence shell, is 3, and its valency is also 3. Its color is silver white. You can see the atomic structure of aluminium. You can see here yellow colored neutrons, red colored protons, they are present inside the nucleus. Total 13 protons, 14 neutrons, and when we add them, we get the number 27, that is the atomic mass of aluminium. And 13 electrons, they are revolving around it in a particular orbit. 2 electrons in the first shell, 8 electrons in the second shell, and 3 electrons in the third shell. Okay, now how it looks, pure aluminium, how it looks, you can see it is silvery white in color, and there are lots of applications of aluminium. This is used to make aluminium foil. Normally we use it for packing food. Then second, aluminium utensils, they are commonly used at our home. Okay. Now let's see about the aluminium ore. Aluminium being very reactive metal, it does not occur in nature in free state. So aluminium is the third highly abundant element in the earth crust after oxidation and silicon. Aluminium is extracted from its ore bauxite. You can see this is the image of a bauxite ore, and the formula for bauxite ore Al2O3 dot NH2O. So water of crystallization is also present here. Bauxite contains 30% to 70% of aluminium oxide, and remaining part is gangue. The gangue is made up of sand, silica, iron oxide, etc. There are two steps in the extraction of aluminium. So there are two steps. In the first step, we do the concentration of bauxite ore, and in the second step, we do the electrolytic reduction of alumina. As you can see in the bauxite ore, oxygen is present. So in order to get pure aluminium, we need to remove this oxygen. Okay, so removal of oxygen is called as the reduction. Okay, so we are going to do the electrolytic reduction of aluminium in the second step. In the first step, we will do the concentration of bauxite ore. So in the concentration method, what we do, we remove the gangue from the ore. Okay, let's see the first process, that is concentration of bauxite ore. Bauxite is the main ore of aluminium. Silica, ferric oxide, titanium oxide are the impurities present in bauxite. So you have to remember these impurities which are present in bauxite ore. Separation of impurities is done by leaching process using Bayer's or Hall's method. So there are two methods for the concentration ore of bauxite. Okay. So here you can see separation of impurities is done by leaching method. Leaching method, it is done by two processes, either Bayer's or Hall's method. In both these methods, finally the concentrated alumina is obtained by calcination. So we can use either of these two methods. Either you can use Hall's method or Bayer's method. Finally, we are going to get the same product. Okay, so let's begin with the Bayes process. We have to study here both the processes, Bayes and Hall's process both. So in the Bayes process, the ore is first grounded in a ball mill. You can see the picture here. The ore is first grounded in a ball mill in a powder form. Then it is leached by heating. In leaching process, what we do? We do some chemical reactions, and by which we remove the gangue particles. So here the leaching of the ore is done with a concentrated solution of caustic soda. Caustic soda is called as sodium hydroxide. So at 140 to 150 degrees Celsius under high pressure for 2 to 8 hours in a digester. You can see there is a big digester in which we are adding sodium hydroxide, that is caustic soda, and we are mixing it with our ore. Okay, and we are heating it at a temperature of 140 to 50 degrees Celsius up to 2 to 8 hours. And as a result, aluminium oxide, which is amphoteric in nature, amphoteric, that means it is acting as acid as well as base. It
टीचर मेरे
reacts
को
with
आते हैं टीचर
it reacts with the aqueous solution of NaOH to form water soluble sodium aluminate. You can see the reaction here. This is the bauxite ore. It reacts with sodium hydroxide in the digester, and it forms sodium aluminate along with water. So this means that bauxite is leached by sodium hydroxide solution, and we get sodium aluminate. The iron oxide in the gangue, it does not dissolve in aqueous sodium hydroxide, and it is separated by filtration. But silica in the gangue, it dissolves in aqueous sodium hydroxide to form water soluble sodium silicate. Aqueous sodium aluminate is diluted by putting in water and is cooled at 50 degrees Celsius. This results in precipitation of aluminium hydroxide. You can see sodium aluminate. It is diluted by putting water in it, and it is cooled at 50 degrees Celsius. And as a result, we are getting aluminium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide. Now the next process, that is Hall's process. In this process, the ore is powdered and then leached by heating with aqueous sodium carbonate in digester to form water soluble sodium aluminate. Here insoluble impurities, they are also filtered out. Filtrate is warmed and neutralized by passing carbon dioxide gas through it. This results in the precipitation of aluminium hydroxide. You can see this is the ore of bauxite, and when it reacts with sodium carbonate, it gives sodium aluminate plus carbon dioxide and water. When this sodium aluminate, it is neutralized by passing carbon dioxide, it gives aluminium hydroxide plus sodium carbonate. As we can see in the Hall's process and in the Bayer's process, we are getting finally aluminium hydroxide. So the aluminium hydroxide which is obtained from Bayer's process and Hall's process, they are again processed. The precipitate of aluminium hydroxide obtained in both Bayer's and Hall's process is filtered, washed, dried, and then calcined with heating at 1000 degrees Celsius to obtain alumina. So when it is heated at 1000 degrees Celsius, it gets converted into aluminium oxide, which is called as alumina, and along with that, water is released. So after that, the next process is electrolytic reduction of alumina. By the electrolytic reduction of alumina, we get pure aluminium. Okay, so let's move on to the summary what we have studied today. So metallurgy can be defined as the process that is used for extraction of metals in their pure form. High and moderately reactive metals occurs as compounds and less reactive metals occur in free state. The minerals from which the metal can be separated economically are called ores. Ores contain many types of impurities such as soil, sand, and rocky substances along with the metal compounds called gangue. Metallurgy involves three main stages: concentration of the ore, extraction of metals, and refining of metals. The process of separating gangue from the ore is called concentration of ores. In this process, concentration of the compound of the desired metal is increased. The separation may be based on gravitation, magnetic separation, force flotation, or leaching. The heavy particles of ores can be easily separated from lighter particles of gangue by gravitation method. Wilfley method and hydraulic separation method are the two methods based on gravity separation. Using magnetic separation method, the magnetic and non-magnetic ingredients in the ore, they can be separated depending on their magnetic nature. The force flotation method is based on two opposite properties, that is hydrophilic and hydrophobic nature of the particles. Leaching is a process where ore is treated with chemicals to convert the valuable metals into soluble metals while impurity remains insoluble. Highly reactive metals, they can be obtained by oxidation reduction through electrolysis. Extraction of aluminium can be done by two methods, either Bayer's process and Hall's process. These processes, we get aluminium hydroxide, and this aluminium hydroxide, it is further calcined by heating at 1000 degrees Celsius to form alumina. And then after obtaining alumina, we do the electrolytic reduction of alumina, and by this process, we get pure aluminium. Okay, so that's all for today's class. Now let's come to the evaluation part. So in evaluation, most reactive metal in the reactivity series is, yes, who will tell me the most reactive metal in the reactivity series? Yes, raise your hand for giving the answer. The most reactive element in the reactivity series is. Yes, anybody? Sitesh, can you give the answer?
Miss, what was the question?
The question is the most reactive element in the reactivity series. You can see it on the screen. Wait, I'll show you. The most reactive metal in the reactivity series is.
Ma'am, is it aluminum?
No, it is not the most reactive element. So above this also there are some metals present. Wait, I'll show you the reactivity series. You can see the reactivity series here. Which metal is at the top? You can see potassium is at top. So this is the most reactive metal in the reactivity series. If I'm talking about the least reactive metal in the reactivity series,
Gold.
which one is reactive? Gold. So gold is the least reactive element in the reactivity series. So as I told you, just learn these lines. Please stop calling me a careless Zebra, instead trying learning how copper saves gold. So by this you can learn the reactivity series and it will be very helpful for you to understand the substitution reaction also. Okay, you have studied
Your
about
voice is
displacement
breaking.
and double. Okay, wait a second. Now. Okay, now it's proper.
Yeah.
Now, okay. So what I'm saying is that in the second chapter, you also have studied about the displacement and double displacement reaction. So if you know the reactivity series, what happens in the double displacement and displacement reaction? The more reactive metal it displaces the less reactive metal. So the metals which are at higher position in the reactivity series, they displace the lower, less reactive element, right? So it will be helpful for you to learn the or understand the double displacement and displacement reaction also, right? So you should remember this, which is the most reactive element, which is the least reactive element, and also you have to learn them accordingly that which elements are present in high reactive elements which are in moderately. You can see here till aluminium here you can see aluminium, it comes in highly reactive element. Okay, and after that they come in low reactive, and the least they are below hydrogen, they come in the least reactive metal. So you have to remember them according to the category. It is in the same chapter that we are studying here. Okay, now let's move on to the evaluation part. Okay, which metals are available in free state in nature? Yes, which metals are present in free state in nature? I just show you the reactivity series. Yes, anyone wants to try? Which metals are available in free state? The metals which are at lower position in the reactivity series, they are least reactive. And such metals, they exist in free state in nature. Now, question number 4, which impurities of bauxite ore are removed by Bayer's process? So in Bayer's process, you have to name the impurities. Which impurities are present in Bayer's process? They are removed.
Miss soil, silica,
Yes,
and gangue
very.
parts.
Yes, all these they are collectively called as gangs. Silica, that is silicon dioxide, ferric oxide, and titanium oxide. These are the impurities which are present in bauxite, right? So you have to remember them. Now the question number 5. Generally, ionic compounds have high melting point. Why? Yes, why ionic compounds they have high melting point? Yes, because the intermolecular force of attraction is high in ionic compounds and large energy is required to overcome it. Therefore, the melting and boiling points of ionic compounds are high. Now the next question, question number 6. Identify the figure and label it. You have to identify the figure. Yes, anybody can tell me the name of the figure, which figure it is?
Ruchika beta, unmute yourself and say the answer.
Yes, which method is? We just studied. It is in the concentration of force. Anybody who knows the answer? This is Wilfley table method.
Ruchika,
And we have to this is a Wilfley table method and you have to label the parts here. You can see here the parts are given here. You have to label them. So these are the slits. This is a vibrating table. These are the gang. And here concentrated ore is collected. Right. So in this way you have to label the diagram. Now next question, with the help of well labeled diagram, you have to explain the fourth flotation process that you have to write down in your notebook. And also you have to describe Bayes process. Okay, so that's all for today's class. If anybody has any doubt, you can ask. You can raise your hand. Yes, anybody have any doubt?
Yes, miss.
Yes.
मिस fourth प्रोसेस वाला थोड़ा एक बार आप एक्सप्लेन कर.
Okay, fourth flotation method you want to revise. Okay. Okay, so fourth flotation method, it is basically works on a principle that in the ore there are two types of substances present in the ore. As I told you, minerals are present and along with that some impurities are present, right? So the impurities and the ore, they are of different nature, right? So ore here it is of hydrophobic nature and gang it is of hydrophilic in nature. Hydrophobic means fear from water. That means ore it doesn't mixes with water, it moves away from the water. Whereas the gang particles they are hydrophilic in nature. Hydro means water, philic means love. So gang particles they are water loving, so they get mixed with the water. So based on this property, this process works. Okay. The particles of metal sulfides, due to their hydrophobic property, so metal sulfides they are hydrophobic in nature, they move away from the water. They get mainly with oil, they mix up with the oil, while due to the hydrophilic property, the gang particles they get wetted with water. Okay, so by using these properties, certain ores of minerals they are concentrated. You can see here ore and gang they have different properties. Ores they are hydrophobic in nature, gang they are hydrophilic in nature, and because of which ore it gets preferentially wetted by the oil and hence floats on the top as foam. Whereas gang particles they are preferentially wetted by water and they settle down. By this process we separate the ore from the gang particles. So let's see the whole process. You can see there is a big container. In this big container, the ore is poured in a powdered form and an ample amount of water is mixed in it. Along with that, certain vegetable oil such as pine oil or eucalyptus oil is also added in the water. Okay, why it is added in the water? Because our ore it is hydrophobic in nature, so it doesn't dissolve in water. It mixes up with the oil. Okay, so in order to mix up the ore with oil, we add some oil in it and we supply some air in it and we continuously we are agitating it as per our requirement. And because of this air blowing inside, it forms bubble inside. Okay, so along with this bubble, the ore, you can say the sulfide ore, they get mixed up with the oil and along with the foam, they come outside and they are collected inside the separate container. Whereas the gang particles, as they are hydrophilic in nature, they mix up with the water and they settle down in the container and we get collected them, or we can separate them from the ore. Okay. So this is
Okay.
the whole process. As you can see here, the foams, they are formed upside, and in this foam, our ore is collected and we can separate it. And the gangue particles, they settle down at the bottom. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else have any doubt? No? Okay. So that's all for today's class. Thank you, children. Okay,
Good
ma'am.
morning, miss.
Good morning. Ma'am, we can wind up the lecture.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.